When it comes right down to it, deciding to upgrade should be a time of celebration for a developer, and what better way to punctuate the move from the Xbox to the Xbox 360 than by giving the 7th gen Call of Duty 3 a good knockaround. Returning to that old chestnut this time, we find ourselves with a game with a good case of launch title syndrome, deciding to forego some effort from the core to spend attributing to useless shit that doesn't amount to anything. For further information, please look at Killzone Shadowfall or Metroid Prime 3 Corruption, but I don't want to beat Call of Duty 3 with the same stick I brandished against its earlier title, Call of Duty 2 Big Red One, because it actually does show sign of learning from its predecessors. Most notably by not covering the entire game's graphics with dish served at a moderately well-liked Indian restaurant off its back pages, and actually uses the new capabilities of the 7th generation to its actual conclusion, and by that I mean, holy Jesus, I can actually see what I'm shooting at, and the Nazis are wearing different uniforms than my allies. Well, most of the time anyway. The problem that I have with the whole uniform differentiation, for lack of a better term, thing, is that this game takes the usual formula and ramps it up a couple of degrees by concerning itself with the factions of the American, French, British, Canadian, and Polish sides this time, which is a lot to deal with in the course of 7 hours, but thankfully it all comes back to the narrative, like when the out-of-the-blue edition of a veranda comes back to lovely dinner parties. See, what Call of Duty 3 lacks in sensibility, it makes up for having a tightened narrative to which the game takes from. Unlike past iterations, which concerned itself with having the setting of just World War II, Call of Duty 3 adds to that by limiting the entire game to the central setting of a small town in France, Chambois, that's being flanked on all sides by the Allied factions, and they're trying to box in the Nazis in that small town. It all takes place after the Battle of Normandy, which left this confusing mess of Allied forces all over the place, and now they are converging on the secondary missions to liberate France, where the Nazis have dug in the most. The people tasked with spearheading this operation are yet another clueless bunch of faceless twits who contribute absolutely nothing to the narrative. However, the ones who do have been constructed this time into actual people, a la Finest Hour, with specific voices, and while it's good to see they've actually added some character, about half of them I can't stand, with most of the American characters being complete assholes. The British leader is a moron, and one of the Polish is the truest definition of tragic stupidity I've ever seen. At the very least, the fact that I can despise some people in this game means that they have actually put admirable effort into actually creating a narrative instead of basically saying, here's a World War II mission, keep shooting Nazis and moving left until victory. The best testament I can give for the narrative is that NPCs are able to have arguments with each other, and that requires these characters to have an actual voice, and some of them actually go through arcs, if you can believe that. Unfortunate as it is that the ones who do are the ones I hate the most. Prime example is Guzzo, who's about as likable as the kid who keeps saying, "Are we there yet?" in the car. Guzzo is a complete ass because his character is uncooperativeness, which means that he is arguing about the plans of the COs while they are in the middle of a life or death situation, and after the death of his two leaders, he's forced to take up the flag and grow a brain. However, this turn of events is handled poorly as shit, because the final words of the second leader is straight-facedly, "Go to hell," and the arc is janky as all hell, and the climax is even worse. I can respect when a character who's gone through a character arc wants to symbolize that by reiterating a line from his mentor, but it loses all importance when that moment reiterates the entire bit word for word from the other characters involved. The second character arc comes from an even more unlikable jackass in the Canadian forces, Baron, whose thing is that he takes his job of protecting his radio way too seriously. And by that I mean he does absolutely nothing warfare-wise throughout his entire screen time, which is harped on multiple times by other characters, especially when he's being sent to help the Polish out, and after spending 99% of the game being an annoying coward, the tragic stupidity of his arc ends when he finally grows a pair, before not realizing the difference between being a coward and a tactical retreat. So he's shot and killed by a German while trying to stand up to their assault alone on Hill 262 like a moron. While the narrative has its issues like any amateur culinary project, the gameplay is where the entire deal comes together. Now, Call of Duty has been through 6 games already, and while each has its own flaws and such, Treyarch took it on board to actually learn from past mistakes and somehow hit the sweet spot for enemy AI and health, grenade usage, regenerating health, and gun mechanics to put together this fast-paced, fun FPS where it's not baby's first shooter or something recreating the Dragon's Teeth disaster from earlier. The game does the usual tank vehicle section and an added tank driving section, which leans too much on the wall of realism, and then there's the addition of QTE sections in the game as well. But before you do that exasperated groan like I thought I'd do, let me tell you that the fighting QTEs are where I had the highest immersion in the entire game. Then COD 3 pushed the QTEs too hard and ended up ruining the whole dish by doing Metroid Prime 3 style fiddling QTEs that tried adding immersion but ended in only annoyance. Look, it's fine if you want to do one for attaching a bomb or using a crowbar, etc. 1 or 2 times, but when you have the exact same sequence play out over 15 times during the entire game, then you've failed to see the point of immersive gameplay. Even though COD 3's design choices were the most immersed I've ever felt in the franchise, it still wasn't enough to put me in the game completely, and that's because you're trying to use faceless characters to make me feel like I'm in some overblown ridiculous situation, and it's too loud for me to get into it, frankly enough. But despite all the small flaws, ultimately it's just tiny cracks in the 80-foot giant concrete barricade that is Call of Duty 3, and I will say that the game legitimately has perfected its gameplay mechanics. Everything works, from the driving sections to the gun variety to the tiny grenade details that truly makes the game hit the overall sweet spot for a great shooter. And the characters actually pushing the story ahead means that I can actually get invested in what's going on and where my role in the action is. The last thing I have to give Call of Duty 3 is a scorecard, just to finalize my opinion about the game itself, before moving on to next week's candidate in the Call of Duty lineup. And thankfully, for the first time since starting this project, I can finally say that I'm glad to have played this gem of a game in a sea of mediocrity that has been the franchise so far. Next time we'll be seeing each other, we'll be looking at something that honestly gives me chills and a bit of preemptive regret that can only come from seeing a game that has been developed as a PSP exclusive, Call of Duty Roads to Victory. Treyarch has come a long way since its experimental days in Big Red One, and I am hoping to see the developer come my way again, and maybe, just maybe, Treyarch will be the one on the job for this iteration, but we won't know that until we get the disc in the drive. So before we part ways once again, I'll leave you as I always do with a victory for gamers. See y'all later.